Okay, welcome back, everyone. Round two for today. We were just on about an hour ago, and now we're back plugging away. We got no choice because we got to flood the world with knowledge, with higher knowledge. Anyways, this Thursday night class, we're going to be studying now on next week's Torah portion, which is Achrei Mos and Kedoshim, a double Torah portion. Like this week is a double Torah portion. We're going to be learning the discourse in Lekutei Torah. It's the last one of the few that we didn't learn yet in the entire book. Pashas Achrei, the last discourse in Achrei. It's an explanation on a mimer. It's Biur Hadvarim. It's an explanation on the discourse. It's to be found in Lekutei Torah on Daf Chavches, page. It would be page 55 if there would be a number. It's between 54 and 56, but there's no number on this side of the page. But the Hebrew page is Chavches, and it's the second column, which is called Amud Beis, and it's on the bottom. It starts with the words Bir Advarim Al Pasuk Bayom Anal. We're going to start this week. B'ez Hashem, with God's help, we're going to conclude it next week. So we'll be up to date next week with the parish. Anyways, next week Torah portion speaks about the service of the high priest on the holiest day of the year, on Yom Kippur. Even though now it's Pesach season and we're going to Shavuos, but we get a little taste of Yom Kippur, because we study in the Torah all about Yom Kippur, which is the holiest day, the day of atonement. On that day, the service in the temple was performed only by one person. Usually there were priests that can do the service, officiate, but on Yom Kippur, only the Kohen Gadol, which is the high priest, was allowed to officiate. And usually the high priest wore special royal clothing, very, very honorable, splendid clothing. We spoke about the Tiferes early in the last year. Tiferes means splendor. The Kohen Gadol wore holy clothing, and usually he would wear special garments, eight different types of garments, which included four garments that contain gold in them. Those garments were not allowed for the Kohen Gadol to be worn when he did the special Yom Kippur services. That means during the day he would do various different things that were not unique to Yom Kippur, and during those services he wore all of his 8 garments. As a matter of fact, if he would be missing one of them, his service would be invalid, because a regular priest must work with 4 garments, must officiate with 4 garments, and the high priest has to use 8 garments, or else it's not kosher, even though he's doing the same type of service that an ordinary priest can do. But yet, let's say they light the menorah, a regular Kohen can do it, but if a regular Kohen does it, he does it wearing 4 garments. When the high priest does it, he had to wear 8 garments, and if the high priest was only wearing 4, or even if he wore 7, but he didn't put on his tzitz, the special, gold plate on his forehead, not kosher, invalid. But on Yom Kippur, the Kohen Gadol would continuously switch from a set of 8 garments to a set of 4 garments. Actually, the set of 4 garments for Yom Kippur were not 4 out of the 8. There was a special set of clothing that were made for him only for Yom Kippur. Actually, they actually made 2 sets for him. For every Yom Kippur, he had 2 sets of clothing that he would never, ever wear again. It was a one-time use, even though they were so expensive. But there was a one-time use, and then it was put away, and it was concealed, hidden, never used again. Even though the Kohen didn't change in size from year to year. And the reason he had 2 pairs for every Yom Kippur is because he went into the Holy of Holies and did the special service in 2 separate slots. And in between, it was interrupted by everyday services that you would do other days. And during those services, he wore his regular 8 garments. So for the morning shot and then for the afternoon shot, he had a separate set of clothing. Actually, the afternoon, which is really interesting, all he did was go into the Holy of Holies to remove a pan and a spoon. But going into the Holy of Holies to remove something deserves a whole set of clothing. You're going into God's private office. So he had a special clear. So those clothing are called Big Day Lavan, white clothing. And the other unique factor of them is that they are all made out of linen. They were white and linen. So he's going to explore the Alter Rebbe over here, the significance of the white linen clothing. Now, if you remember, about a year ago, we studied a long discourse about the garments. Actually, we did it last year on this week's parsha, Achrei, next week's parsha. So we started, I think, the discussion on the Kohen Gadol's garments. I think that's when we did it. And we learned it for a couple of weeks, and then I didn't conclude it. We have other, maybe we should go back to that to finish it up. We went through, I think, like three garments, what each garment atones for. It was phenomenal stuff. I forgot everything we learned, but it's phenomenal discussion that we had. What each of those garments represented and the spiritual dynamics of them and so forth. But now we're going to focus primarily on the four. And in the beginning of the discourse, the part that we're going to learn today, not the truth is the whole discourse, is going to talk about the idea why it was made out of linen and why it was white, and why that is particular the garments that he needs for Yom Kippur when he goes into the Holy of Holies. So let's see. This is an explanation on the discourse in which it says that on this day he atones. So I'll make a confession. I was busy this week with all these classes and a bunch of other things. I didn't learn that discourse to review it. So I'm Ezrat Hashem, God's help, will do it for next week so that I'll have that information. But meanwhile, it's a smooth read, pretty smooth read today on today's part that we're going to learn today. Then today we're not going to learn so much the connection and why Yom Kippur, what's so significant about the Yom Kippur service. We're primarily going to explain briefly the concept of linen and white. What is the significance of white linen? And why that it is the garments, the chosen garments. On the verse, on this day he will atone. So we are going to preface it by first explaining the concept of the white clothing. In other words, in order to understand what the Kohen is, the high priest is going and accomplishing on Yom Kippur, to get the essence of Yom Kippur, the holiest day, and the high priest going in, we will know it by appreciating the garments he wore. Via the garments, we will understand the essence of the day. We'll use the garments as our prelude. The service of Yom Kippur is with white garments. Not only were that's one element of them that they were white, but there's something else. They were from linen. Like it says, which linen comes from flax. Now, how do we know it's made out of linen? Because the verse says, bad kodesh, a holy bad shirt. The sages didn't know what bad is. The regular word for linen is the word pishtan. Hey shin tuf taf nun. That means that's linen. For example, where the Torah says you're not allowed to wear wool and linen together, the prohibition of shatnez, it's actually going to be in next week's Torah portion as well. Not in the first Torah portion, in the second Torah portion, Kedoshim. Over there it gives you the prohibition of wearing wool and linen together. So the Torah says you're not allowed to wear tzemer upishtan yachtav. You can't wear wool and linen. Pishtan is linen. But here the Torah says the shirt should be made out of ksaynes bad. Doesn't say pishtan, it says bad. So the sages were puzzled. What does bad mean? So they were working on figuring that out. And it says not only a shirt should be made out of bad, umichnesei bad, and the pants of bad. So what is bad? And then the verse continues, big day kodeshem, they are holy clothing. Now, from the idea that it's saying that it's holy clothing seems to imply that because they're made out of bad, which is we understand later to mean linen, that's why they're holy. Which would mean that linen in itself is lending itself to holiness. Because they're holy, they should be made out of linen. Yes, what's the question? What's the idea? Because they're holy, they should be made out of polyester. Because they're holy, they can be made out of cotton. Why linen? You have to figure out that there's something about linen that is conducive to holiness. So what is that? Ta'ayim b'Zohar Parshas Vayechi Daf Reish Yud Zayin. In Zohar, in the Torah portion of Vayechi, on page Reish Yud Zayin Amud Aleph, look over there. I looked it up. There briefly, it mentions the holy garments of the Kohen Gadol. Let me tell you what it says over here. Zohar. Tanya, Bekama Asaris Takalna. Many places I was looking. Someone is very excited over here, and he says, Rebbe, one of the speakers of the Zohar. I don't know who he is right now. And he says, and many times I was looking into these garments. I'm looking into them, I'm examining these garments. I mentioned to you when we learned that discourse about the garments, that intrigues me, the garments. Like the garments have such deep secrets, so specified, the garments, because it says over there, Big Day Kodesh, and they're holy garments. Also, Big Day Kodesh, you should make holy clothing. My Kedusha Hacha, what is the holiness? It's a garment. What's the holiness? Well, this is what we learned. They're holy in every place. Big Day Kodesh, and they're holy. Big Day Kodesh, they somehow reflect the supernal garments, God's garments, the garments above. The Tanya, because we learned, Kohen Gadol le'ela, Kohen Gadol le'tata. Above in the highest spheres, there is a high priest, who isn't human, some spiritual, which is the supernal being above the high priest. And down here, there is also the high priest. Sometimes it says it's the archangel Michael. That's the Kohen Gadol. In any case, the Kohen Gadol above there, and corresponding to him down here in this world is the high priest. Levushin di yakar le'ela. So above, the high priest wears splendid clothing. Levushin di yakar le'tata. Down here, the Kohen also wears very, very splendid clothing. So you have just a brief mention that these garments are very holy, and they're reflecting the garments of the high priest above. That's what it says in Parshas Vayechi. But it just gives you an idea that there's a holiness, an intrinsic holiness in the garment. In Parshas Pekudei, the next one, in Parshas Pekudei, the Zohar, he mentions two places to look. Parshas Vayechi, but Parshas Pekudei Daf Reish Lamed. So over here, it's even stronger. Tachazi, come in here. The Zohar says, come and see. Mike Siv, what does it say? The Kohen should wear a shirt of bad. Ilin levushin miyachtin lekudusha. These are clothing that are designated to holiness. Why? Because bad yechidai. Bad comes from the word alone. This week in the parsha, it mentions that the leper should be sent out and to be isolated, and he should sit badad alone in isolation. Badad means alone. So over here, when it says midai bad, it means alone. So the fact that it is alone means it is separate from everything else. And therefore, it's designated for holiness. We'll soon see more about that. That in order for him to wear it, he has to dip in a mikvah, submerge in a mikvah. Anyways, so this is where we see that there's something very special about these clothing, and particularly that's why they're made out of linen. Now, in Talmud tractate Dvachim Daf Yud Ches, Beis, in the page 18 on the second side. The verse says bad. So again, we're trying to figure out what does this mean. The Talmud is trying to figure out what is this bad. We don't know what bad is. And they said bad comes from the word alone, which means davara oilem and akarka bad bebad, something that grows from the ground in single stalks. Linen, what does that mean? Each seed is on its own stalk. All other grains and stuff, they grow out, and there's many kernels clustered together on every stalk. But on linen, each and that's why it's called bad, because bad means singular. That's how the sages knew that bad is referring to linen, because they deduced from the word bad. They looked into the word bad, which bad means single, and they looked at which plant can you make clothing from, in which it's in a manner of a singular. Pirish Rashi Sham, Rashi says, Kana Yechidi, Mikol Garin, from every Garin. Oh, when you plant it, from each seed you plant, a seed produces one. That's the main thing. I'm not sure when it grows, if it grows with one kernel. That may be incorrect. But the planting of the seed, each seed produces one. You don't have two from one seed should grow out two stalks. Each one is one. Masha Enke, which isn't the case. We turn over the page. Bashar kol minei tzemacha, by all the other types of vegetation. Like wheat, v'dogon, and different types of grain. Shagam moshibolim oil mechita achas, from one grain or from one kernel that you planted, come out many stalks. But over here, it's only one. So the physical characteristic of oneness that is within the linen is reflecting something very, very special. The Inyan and the idea is bad, because the linen, its root, every physical phenomenon, every physical object, plant, creature, animal, has a spiritual counterpart, a source from where it comes from. And where does linen come from? Linen comes from a place of oneness. It means as the world and creation evolves, we enter into a state where there is already a multiplicity. There's very aspects. Of course, God is the one being, the source of it all. But when you're in that realm, you see many, and therefore God's oneness is a little obscured and blocked. But then you go very, 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 very early on, where there is nothing yet there to create many. Everything is just a singular oneness. There's the level of the pure infinite light before it takes on any shape, form, and definition. And the linen is a plant that is plugged into that level. So now we understand it super, super old. That doesn't mean that if you go make yourself a pants of linen that you're holy. It doesn't happen that way. But when it's holy garments made for the holy temple, it was made, I think the word tzaddikim, who on Shabbos wore purposely linen clothing for this reason, for that unique quality to live. I know, and the inyanu lefisha b'chinas bad, because bad I know shenimshach ma'olam ma'achtos, because it stems and it's drawn from the world of unity. So where do we find that the first time the Torah mentions linen? So it says by Cain and Abel, when they brought their sacrifice, when they got into a massive fight, and Cain killed Hevel. So Cain, also known as Cain, he brought his offering from linen plants. And the Arizal says, and we say the reason why you're not allowed to, one of the reasons we're not allowed to mix wool and linen is because you're actually, Cain brought wool comes from sheep. Hevel brought from the sheep. So you're actually mixing Cain and Hevel's energies together. And the two of them don't get along, as you see from the very beginning story. So, Indian carbon Cain, the Chsiv, it says, Cain brought me Pri Adama, from the fruit of the earth. Min Hashem. The Omer Azal. Now the Torah doesn't say what he brought, but the sages tell us that he brought seeds of flax seeds, which what you produce linen from. Now, why did he choose that? There's so many nice fruits he could bring. Couldn't he offer up a nice avocado? Something nice, something, a little more, nice melon. Again, he's got everything he can bring from squash, from all things. What does he take? He takes linen plants. because he was a great, great mystic. He knew all the secrets. And he wanted to reach the supernal high, the supernal source of everything. So he looked for a particular plant or entity that is going to register up in the supernal oneness, in the world of oneness. That's why he was so excited about it. So imagine, now we understand why he got so upset that he was rejected. Because he had it all down pat, how his what he's going to offer is going to stimulate at the deepest point. Because it is bad. This Lekutei Torah is not the Lekutei Torah that we're learning from Shneir Zalman of Liadi, but when he's quoting over Lekutei Torah, he means Lekutei Torah of the Holy Ari. Parshas Kedoshim, Bahazara Shatnez, by the prohibition against mixing wool and linen together. Over there in the piece that begins with the words Kai and Hell. I tried looking up that piece, and it's full of Kabbalistic, cryptic statements, and I couldn't make out heads or tails. That I didn't look up. Look in those two places of Zohar that I didn't either look up. In any case, but now, and therefore, it is for this reason that we understand why the Kohen Gadol, the high priest, needed to be dressed on Yom Kippur ba'avodas hayom when he was doing the unique, meaning not the entire Yom Kippur, not even when he was officiating, but only when he was doing the specific things that are only done on Yom Kippur. The big day, ba'dafka daika, he had to use linen clothing. And the reason for that is ki oz hu nechnas lifnei ulifnim, because physically then he was walking into the inner chamber. What does that mean? The physical world is a replica of the spiritual, especially the holy temple. When he's going into the inner world, meaning he's going into the place of absolute oneness, to a level of primordial oneness before there is all the colorings and the definitions and multiplicity of existence. And therefore he's got to be garbed in clothing that will not clash with that oneness, that will not pull him out of the oneness. Because if you're wearing, you have to be so sensitive then. Everything has to kind of synchronize in the space where you're going. You have to be fully, the garments have to match the environment. He's going into an environment of oneness. So you have to wear clothing that reflect that oneness, that come from that oneness. He's going in lifnei lifnim, inward, to a world of unity, to a world of singularity. L'chaper, in order to bring atonement, al kol pishei b'nei Yisrael, to draw forth. Now, why is it that when the Kohen goes, why does he go on the day of atonement into the place of oneness? How about the day of so many other special days? Why the day of atonement? Because you can't bring an atonement for sins unless you reach and draw forth from this place. This is the only from here can one bring rectification on any kind of blemishes. And that's why on this day he would go into this very, very high place. So like it says, the nislach, and he will bring atonement, chulu, l'chol hadas b'nei Yisrael, to bring atonement for everybody. And the atonement can only come from this very high place. V'hainu, and for their reason, he needed to go there, the big day pishtan dafka, with linen clothing. V'zeu inyan, this is the idea where it says, Havaya bodod yanchenu, which means Hashem bodod yanchenu. God will lead us, will lead the Jewish people. This is one of the words, I think, of Bilam. When Bilam was cursing the Jewish people, but God flips the curses into blessings, he says, God will lead them bodod. So it's what that means is God is leading them into a level of badad. Maybe it's not even from Bilam's words. Maybe this is from Moshe's words. When Moshe is blessing the Jewish people before his passing in the end of his Eisa Bracha, Hashem will lead them into badad. What does badad mean? Hashem will lead them into the level of singularity of oneness, which means God is lifting the Jewish people out of the multiplicity of creation and into this very, very deep, deep, deep place above all of creation and above all of the colorations and differentiations that define and therefore separate one thing from another, but rather God will lead the Jewish people into their consciousness, the level of their souls, into a place where they can tap the absolute oneness. It's showing them the highest place you can go to. It's referring to a prophecy in the Messianic times. God will lead them into the state of Badad. Now it's interesting regarding the Mitzorah, it says, this week in the Parsha, as we mentioned earlier, that the Mitzorah gets also cast Badad, which means there it's the opposite. And also regarding when the Jews go to exile, we say Tisha B'Av by night, we say Eicha Yashva Badad. How is she sitting Badad in isolation alone? So generally the word Badad has very negative connotation to it. And here we're learning Badad in a very, very holy state. Because there's two ways of being in isolation. One is that you're an outcast, and the other one is that you're outstanding. Okay. So one can be separated from society because they are lower than society, and society rejects them and pushes them out. Or a person can be separated from society because they're above and beyond everybody else, and no one can in any way attach themselves to someone so high and so lofty. So regarding Mashiach, we know that he's Mashiach is called a leper because he's inflicted with this is the discussion that we had in the last few classes this week, and the one's class is called the Keys of Redemption. So there we spoke about Mashiach being rooted in the level of Badad, but first as a leper, he's kind of an outcast, rejected. But then the truth of his separation is revealed, that he's really above all of existence, above and beyond on the levels that are Badad. And he leads us into this deep, deep level of Badad. And on Yom Kippur, the Kohen goes into this place of Badad. And how does he go into the place of Badad? He needs to wear the Bad. The Bad takes him into the Badad. Pirish, Badad. Maybe that's the reason why we're seeing right now that Budweiser is having a lot of problems. Everybody following the news, they're having a hard time. There's a big boycott against Budweiser. So now we're talking about Bud. It came to me that Bud. Any connection, you'll figure it out. Pirish, Badad. Oh, I got it. They were the Mitzorah got cast out to sit alone. So that was what happened to Bud. They budded them out. This is really interesting. Okay, good. Now I have a video to make. A short clip. Pirish Badad, Ubchinis Levada. The Badad means alone. But what does this really mean, referring to in a holy place? It means elevating to a level where God sits alone, like before the worlds were created. Meaning, once creation comes into existence, there's already multiplicity. There's many things. You're seeing already the variations. Creation is built on variations. But this is a level which is prior to anything but the very, very simple truth of God himself. Like it was before creation began. So even though now that creation there is already all this multi-levels, but there's still a dimension where the singular oneness of God is felt. And that's the Holy of Holies, when the Kohen goes in. Look in, now he gives a few different references to this idea. Look in the end of the discourse in the Era, Pashas Ve'era, Be'inyan B'chinas Yachid, where over there is where he explains what it means Yachid. What does that mean, Yachid? There are two words in Hebrew that represent, that stand for oneness. One of them is the word Echad, like we say, Hear, O Israel, Hashem Elokeinu, Hashem Echad. And another word is Yachid. So Echad is a lower type of oneness than Yachid. Yachid is a more intense level of oneness. Yachid means singular. Echad means one. So Echad you can say about something that is made up of pieces. You can say echad, right? Because it is echad represents unification, many things unified into one entity. The Jewish people are called Goy Echad. They're a nation they're a one nation, because we're very deeply attached to each other, and therefore we are unified into oneness. And when we say regarding God that God is Echad, we mean that notwithstanding the fact that there is the heaven and the earth, and in heaven itself there are 7 heavens, the 4 directions, there is a world with billions and gazillions of different features and creatures and beings and so on and so forth. Yet they're all unified with the one singular energy that is infusing them, that is being them into existence. And that's the meaning of the word echad, where the aleph, which is God, is the truth of the ches and of the dalet. He's the truth of existence. He's the truth of everything. However, we're dealing with everything. There's lots of stuff, and God is the truth of them. But that's one level. But then there's a deeper level, a level which is still prior, where you don't even notice creation. Creation is not even existing. All there is this singular simplicity of the simple, infinite light of God before anything else can possibly exist. And that referred to as Yachid. So this level of Badad is the level of Yachid, not Echad. That's what we mean. It's the world. So when he said earlier, we're entering into the world of Achdus, he doesn't really mean the word Echad. He means even deeper than that. You're going into the world of Yachid. Really, Yachid. And over there, look, in the end of the discourse, over there he's coming to explain why the prayer is another discourse where he's talking about the prayer of a businessman, someone who's occupied with worldly things and therefore has so much more distractions, yet their prayer is more potent and more powerful than people that are engaged in holiness all day long. And he explains over there, again, I didn't look it up, but I think the sense I'm getting is that the ordinary prayer from a person who's not wrestling with the world, with the darkness of the world, so through his prayer, he brings about the unification of Echad, which is related to the unification of the Sfirot on the highest level, Chachma and Bina, Abba ve'ima, father and mother are unified, but that's Echad. But the prayer of the person who struggles with the world, his prayers transcend this unification and reach God on a much higher level, on a level of Anochi. I am God, my God, higher than any name. Same idea of Yachid. As he says over here, there's the level of God, of Hashem himself. God's very, very, when God says I am, higher than any expression. Look in the second part of Tanya, in the ninth chapter of the second part of Tanya, which is called Shara Yichud Ve'emunah. So if you look over there, in the note, there is the main chapter and there's the note, and over there in the note, the Alter Rebbe explains how there is a whole system of tzimtzum, of contractions, and through the power of contractions, you have all the sefirot and attributes and unification of attributes and so on and so forth. But this is all already God lowering himself down after the contraction to have a relationship and to be within the vicinity of a creation, to lend himself into the possibility of all kinds of different things existing. And God does that to himself already, that he colors himself with various different colorations, with different types of modes, so and so. But that's all after the tzimtzum, after the contraction. But then there is prior to the contraction. Prior to the contraction is infinitely higher, and over there, all these things don't even exist. Simple oneness. So this is all that level called Badai. Before the worlds were created, before even the preparatory stages within the divine are being created. Simplistic, simple essence of God, the simple or light as it truly is. And he's going to explain that's the whiteness and that's the linen. And that's where the Kohen Gadol is going on Yom Kippur, to atone for sins. Beyond all the systems. So the crust of the whole discourse is going to explain that mitzvahs that we do all year long, all of our divine service, mitzvahs, Torah study, it's all already bringing and combining and channeling and stimulating the various different aspects of the divine characteristics. But it's all already within this system already. It's all within the echad. It's in the level of oneness, it's holiness. But it's holiness where there's already multiplicity. And that's why there are so many different types of mitzvahs and different details. It's all reflecting the multifaceted and multicolored and multi-dimensions of the divine. But when we need to fix it all, when there's blemishes and all of that, then you cannot fix it from within the system. You have to go beyond the system. You have to go up to the singular essence. And from there, draw down a whole new relationship, revamp the relationship on that level. For that, you need linen clothing in the Holy of Holies, linen and white clothing. So, the ayin Mr. Shabbat, yeah, the ayin oid minyan bad Lekutei Torah Parshas Tzav, Gaba Midei Bad, the Eitz Chaim is giving you a bunch of sources to look up. Arizal Shar Erech Ampe Perikei, Ayin Bereshis Chachma Shar Tshuva Perigimel, Moira is base, Siv Dalas, Vayamash Kos V'Makam Acher, Gaba Edaga. Okay, all these places, I'm sure if we look it up, it will be very, very enlightening. But now, Lekutei, now he continues. Lekachem, Big Day Lava, this will also. So till now we focused on the linen. Now he's also going to explain why they're white. Because white, the color of white is very different than every other color. All other colors is like already an addition to the substance. White is not an addition. White is the color of essence. When something is colorless, it's really white. So white is an essential color. Another color is already an added dye. Now, it doesn't mean that there's nothing that is not colored in essence. For example, blood is red. You're not going to say that the redness of the blood is added to the blood. Blood is red. But yet, the redness and the blood are two separate things. God added the color of red to blood. Not like a person did it, God did it, but it's an addition to it. It's not the essence of the blood. But when something is, but what's the essence, essential color of essence prior to anything is white. And anything that's not white is already a coloration. Some things we color, we dye them into a certain color. And certain things God dyed. God dyed them into that color. But when God would leave things in their essential state, everything would be white. White is the core essential color. Because whiteness is not like all other colors. Whiteness is the essence of the matter. And there's nothing added. It's got the essence of it alone. Which isn't the case with all other colors. They are a color in which we already dye something. Odom, we make something red. Yarok, we make something yellow. Shateva, Odom, which is the color of red. Udavar noisef. It's already an additional etzem adavar on the essence of the matter, or of the object, or whatever it is. Shahaya lavan al derech machshel. Initially, it was white. The achshavai, the coloring nasa adam, it became red. Take a white paper and then you color it. Now, what happens if you said blood or something, and certain things that are gold is yellow? It's not no one colored it yellow. It is this yellowish color. Yeah, but God added that yellow to it. It's a pigment, a color that was kind of added to it as opposed to essence of essence. The nimtza comes out zahar kava. This is already a mixture. Al etzem adavar. You're adding something on. It's an additive, something added on to it. Mashenkin gavan lavan, which isn't the case with white color. Shu atzmi. This is the whiteness is essence. It's in color. It is what it is at its core. In other words, if God brings something into existence, a material object into existence, without adding anything, how would you see it? What would be its appearance? White. Now you might say, what does white mean? White? Does white mean clear? Like water is clear. It seems white because he's talking later. I guess clear is not too far from white. I'm not exactly sure, but he speaks later how like when you take linen, which is white, and you wash it, he's going to say it now. The einoy tseva, it's not a color. Everything else is a color, which means a coloring, a dye, something is added to it. Not this. Now this, that you wash white linen clothing, Belush and Ashkenaz, and in Yiddish, in German language, it's called Beleicht Leivent. They scrub and they do a whole procedure with linen, which is to bring out to make it white. So you see that it seems like you're making it white. He says no. What you're doing is you're rubbing it and scrubbing it. I don't know exactly what the procedure is. And what that does is it allows its essential essence to come out. Because you're not adding, you're just revealing. You're pulling forth. What this is doing, it's not adding whiteness, it's only adding the yizgala. It's helping bring forth. It's helping reveal. Etzem halav nunis, the essential whiteness that is in the clothing. And now we use this idea of physical coloring to get an idea how this applies also to the spiritual world above, to the spiritual realms above. Because just like there are colors down here, there is colors in the divine spheres as well. What are those colors? Those are the characteristics that there is. Kindness is one kind of color, and harshness is a different color. I mean, severity. Kiniyadun is known inyan oiros v'kelim. It is known the concept of lights and vessels. And spiritually, it is known that the divine emanations, divine lights, the way God channels himself into the world is through a system of energies and vessels. This is what we've been learning all week long, that the vessels have to be able to hold the lights, or else they shatter. And the intensity of the lights, and we have to expand the vessels. All this we've been learning in the previous 4 classes. But we learned in the concept of oires v'kelim, lights and vessels. So initially you start just with the lights. The vessels are then come on later. Before the vessels were emanated, it is not possible to say on the flow of the infinite, of the light of the infinite. If you're going to have a flow of divine light in its purity, before you get into attributes, before you get into the vessels, and you allow the light to come out as is, it's not any closer, it's an energy that's not closer to intelligence or to kindness or to this kind of energy, because it's only the vessels that give character and personality to the energy, give it some kind of a form. But if you leave the light without any vessels, it's unknowable, it has no definitions, it's simple with utter simplicity. Without any leanings, neither to one way or the other way. It's not kind, it's not severe, it's not this, it's not that, it's just simple. That it's closer to kindness more than wisdom, no? Why? That he is not of any of these attributes. God doesn't have even the slightest leaning towards this attribute or that attribute. It's beyond it all. So how do attributes come out? We do say about God that you're kind and you're compassionate and he's a warrior and he's a king and that's only after the vessels. After the vessels, the containers. Have limited the lights. Nasa have limited the energy. Nasa So this affects already that the light itself gets tainted in a color. The way to understand it simply is like when you see a traffic light. The light is a simple light, but when it's coming through a yellow glass or a green glass or a red glass, it's going to shine red, green, and yellow. But it's really the same light. But its effect is red, green, and yellow based on the glass, not in the light itself. So the glass is the container. So above, there is a green light, and that's the kindness. There is a red light, that's the gevura, but that's because of the glass, the red glass that's there. Or the light, or the energy of gevura. Then the sphera has this particular name, which isn't the case of the lights on their own. If we take the lights out of the containers and we let them be on their own, we refer to them as without any substance. They're undefinable and indescriptible because they have essentially no description. Without any particular substance of this or that. And the reason for that is because light is always reflecting the luminary where the light is coming from. Even though we're talking about a light, which means it's emanation, but the emanation is always similar to what it reflects. There's a rule saying light is similar to its illumination. It's illuminator. The light is always a reflection. So since the illuminator is who is God himself, and God doesn't have a definition, because if he would have a definition, he would have a limitation, because every definition is a limitation. It's a this and not that. And being that he is not defined with any definitions, so his emanation, his light, when he allows his light to be released from him as is, it's simple with utter simplicity. So it's an infinite power without any colorings. And that's why which color would be most appropriate for that simple light, we call it whiteness. The light is similar to its source. And therefore it's above from the substance of emotions. Not only doesn't it have the colorings or the style of the emotions, the character of the emotions, but it doesn't even have the characteristics of the intellect. Even intelligence is a definition. Kenoid, as it is known, he's beyond all the 10 spherot. And this is the idea of the difference between Gav and Love, and between the color white and Shara Gavanim to all other colors. Because white, which is an essential color, all you have is the substance without anything else added. And that's if you had to look at the color of the Oring Sof, the only thing you can say is white. Obviously, understand that you're not dealing with something that you can color it in the way we understand white, but the white serves as an example for this idea. This is a higher level, much higher than the lights. 1 second. The white above, what is it? Is bechinas ha'oros. This is an indicative. This is symbolizing the lights as they are on their own. Before they enclosed themselves or vested themselves in the vessels, before the light went through the green glass or the red glass or the yellow. This is what is the white colors indicating. That the radiance is the pure Orein Sof. Mamish, literally the pure Orein Sof, Pashut betachlos apshitus, which is simple with utter simplicity. Not designed. But once the lights become enclosed in vessels and containers, Or bekeli, and the light is now inside a container, inside a vessel. And which keli? Either kliya chesed, either the garment of kindness, or bekliya gevura, or the garment of strength and might. What has happened now? Once there is already a container, the container is already an idea that it's containing and limiting and defining. Shakeli magbela, or the keli limits the light. Ha'oira pashat, the simple light. It makes already in the light some kind of an image, like the color of green or red. Like the color of green and red, which happens on a simple light, but now it's green or yellow light. That which was once simple and non-descriptive, now you have a description for it. It's a red light, it's this light, it's that light. Now it's yellow, sumik, dark red, eish, fire, mayim, water, chesed, gevura. Oh God, fire is God and water is God, but it's already it's godliness already with a certain flavor. So in another mimer in Pashas Bechukosai, which is in the end of Vayikra, the last parsha, over there he explains a similar concept in the difference between letters that are written and letters that are engraved. When you write a letter, when you write words, you can either write them, that's one way, or it can be engraved. What's the difference between the letter? And the Torah is very much into engraved letters, because on the tablets, the letters of the 10 Commandments were engraved. Also, talking about the garments of the high priest, he had engraved letters in the stones that were on his shoulders, or also on his breastplate. There were engraved letters, and also on his forehead. So he's filled with these engraved letters. Matches with the concept of white. Because engraved letters means that there's nothing there but the substance of the letters, and the thing it is engraved on are one. There's nothing added. When you are writing a letter, you're adding ink already to the parchment. The letter is an addition. So it's similar to this. It's not exactly this, because over there, even the carving is making the part that has been carved out being different than the rest of it. So you're not talking about purely untouched substance, because then you wouldn't even have engraved letters, because the engravement means that you can feel with your finger that this part, or you can see with your eyes, this is indented or bolded, but it's still much closer to the essence because there's nothing added. But here, when we're talking about white, we're talking about a simple level before anything has any moved in it at all. So, but it's similar to that idea. The difference that there is between engraved letters, they're from the very substance itself without anything added. Between written letters, that the ink is an addition. So what is it? Let's understand something. That's the difference between the tablets and the Torah. The tablets is a more primordial state of Torah, where Torah is one with God without anything added. But as the Torah merges closer to us, the Torah picks up already, in order that it should be able to speak our language, it is forming itself with ink. A far more external Torah than the Torah as it is but then it's too divine for us to understand it. So it has to lower itself down. He says, the Tzemach Tzedek says, this is the grandson of the author, this is close. It's similar to the difference that we explained between white and all other colors. Now, the investment of the lights in the vessels, what's the point of what was wrong with having pure light? The answer is there's no creation as this pure light. Because then there's only God. What's experienced is only the singular oneness of Him, the singular essence of God, nothing else. There's no room or space for anything else. There cannot be anything other than Him. In order for Him to design a world, create a world, so what He did was He lowered His energies down and formed His energy into different formations. How did He do that? Through the Sphirot, So the whole concept of spheros and attribute is to give character, personality, definitions, and limitations. And as a result of that, you can create all the various different features and multi-faceted existence that exists. So this is all in order to create the world. God's sophisticated is otherwise simplistic light. The enclosement of the lights in the vessels is in order from it should draw from the light his havas that the world should come into existence. And they should be worlds, and what kind of worlds? Ubale gvul. And a creation that is limited. God wanted a limited world with borders and boundaries. And now he takes this concept and he shows it to us how it's stated by King David, by David HaMelech in Tehillim. David says, I think in chapter 68, and this is what it says in the Pasuk over there, Rabbois Asisa, you've done a lot. You've done many great things. Then he says, I don't know the whole verse, but he skips over Yechulu. And he says, your wonders, and your thoughts, Eleinu to us, Atzmu misaper, are too numerous for us to be able to relate. So simply it means, God, your wonders and your thoughts, your enormous wonders and thoughts that you've cast upon us, but you take care of us in such an amazing way, are too numerous for us to relate. That is the simple meaning. The more mystical meaning that he's introducing over here is as follows. God, you are simple, you are one, you are beyond all definition. How can your essential energy, which is so transcendent and so above, reach us? And here he's taking it further. Even when God begins this process in the world of Atzilus, in the world of emanation, and he emanates the core characteristics, the core primary characteristics, and they are the 10 attributes. But it's only 10 attributes. That is still way too simplistic for such a complex, finite world to exist, where there is so much detail and detail and detail and detail, billions and billions and billions and gazillions of features that this world is made out of. Every creature, every butterfly has a different shape and form and color, and flower, and every snowflake looks different. You ever see? Look up snowflakes. They're awesome. Each one is a piece of art. Every micro cell is different, with its own DNA, with its own. Every human being's fingerprint is different. So how does that multi? The answer is nifloisecha, your wonders, amachshaveisecha, and your thoughts. Those are your primary building blocks that are in Atzilus up there. Eleinu, for it to come down into our realm, all the way down into our multifaceted existence that we live in. Atzmu misaper, for this you had without an end filtrations and vessels in which you feed and funnel your light to take on a billion gazillion different forms. It has to come through so many, and that's the meaning. It's not too much to relate. We can't count how many filters you have, how many colorings you're coloring your light and your energy through. It's going through so many different vessels and containers and different types of mixtures for it to descend lower and lower and lower. The more it descends, the more fragmented it becomes, the more specified it becomes, the more details it becomes, the more variations it becomes. It goes into the variations and variations and variations until we come to our world. Eleinu is to us. Piddish, what does it mean? Piddish. In order for it to be drawn down. From the lights of the 10 attributes. Which they are your wonders and your thoughts. Eleinu, in order for it to descend all the way down here into the way things are in our world. Dahainu bibiyah, that it should come down in the 3 lower worlds. The world of creation, the world of formation, and the world of completion down here below. This is too much to enumerate. The myriads and myriads of contractions. This is the vessels. These are all this is all the system of the vessels. The light and the energy is really one simple energy that's imbuing all of creation, all of existence. It's one being, one God with one simple energy. But the complexity happens through the vessels. So the simple energy is white. And the simple energy is linen. Meaning linen is plugged into the simple energy. And that's why linen is white. It's on that. So when the kelim shoinim, and there's all these variations of vessels. And in general, what is the idea of these vessels? Hutzir adam. In general, the vessels are an image of a human. God is funneling himself down through the image of a human. We spoke many times. The attributes are all formed in a form of a human psyche. Obviously, way, 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 way incomprehensible to us, but it's the same system as we are. And that's why the human being in the world controls the entire system, because the system was designed to be human. And we are just copies of that supernal human in a miniature form down here, but we're given full control over the supernal human. What a compliment, and what a crazy, crazy, awesome, frightening responsibility. The supernal man, which means the design that designs the cosmos, is basically us. And therefore, what we do with our bodies and what we do, that's why, of course, it makes so much sense for people to say, I decide I want to be a girl now. Tomorrow I want to be a boy. The next day I don't want to be not a boy, what do you mean? Were you messing with your body? Are you out of your mind? Think about this. Think about this. That's altering the body completely. But how about just even when the body is meant to function in a godly way, so that it keeps the flow of all the systems perfectly flowing. When we mess up with our body and we do stuff that is not good, no matter what, in all aspects of human function, the Torah tells us exactly what the function of God, how God treats his own body, and therefore how we should treat our body in alignment with God's body. But that's how the divine light is channeled into the world. In general, it's in the image of a man. Like it says, God says, let us create man, b'tzalmeinu, in our form, kidmuseinu, in our image. What is that form? Chabad, which are the three intellectual faculties, chachma, bina, das, wisdom, understanding, and knowledge. Chagas, the emotions are chesed, gevura, teferes, kindness, severity, and beauty. And then there's nehi, netzach, hod, yesod, victory, glory, and foundation. The nehi and the netzach, hod, yesod, mislapshim, ba'asiyah. Now, these three dimensions, intellect, emotions, and the lower emotions, called the practical emotions, netzach, hod, yesod. So the lower three are primarily what vests itself in our physical world. The first three of the Atzilus are vested in Bria, that's world of divine intelligence, even though it's creation, but it's a very enlightened creation. The emotions are in the world of angels, in the world of formation. That's why they're very intense, very emotionally charged. Down here is the world of practicality. And is the Netzach Hod Yesod. But the point over here is, this human figure can't do anything, because the power lies only in one being, in the singular emanation of God's very self. That's where the power is. All of this is only to define it, but the power, the oomph, the energy, the electricity, if you might say it, is all a singular being. So who has to run through, what has to pass through this whole system is the light. It's that current that has to come down. Where is it coming down from? It's coming down from the very, very top of the human. Who's the supernal human above? What's the top? The very Chachma. Chachma is the first attribute. And Chachma is where it's transit. In Chachma is where it transitions into vessels. Beyond Chachma, there is no vessels. It's just lights. In Chachma is when the transitioning into vessels and container stuff. But through Chachma and via all the others, all the way down to the Netzach Hod Yesod, the Chachma and the Or Ein Sof that's in Chachma becomes a force to sustain and to create and to animate all of life. We're down here below. And that's how God reaches down here into every aspect of existence. Through this whole system, it is drawn from Chachma of the world of Atzilus, to be enclosed, Gam came Ba'asiyah, also into the world of Asiyah. Maimer Azal, and as the sages say. Now this process of taking an abstract Chachma and then channeling it all the way down into action, he finds an interesting parallel to that and similar to that in the creation of an individual human being. When any human is created, what are you created from? We're created from the seminal drop of the Father. Now that drop is an undefined, simple droplet stemming from the very, very deep part of the soul, but that's all. It's a simple droplet, has no design. But then they bring this droplet up to whoever is in charge, and they say, so how is this droplet going to formulate? Is this child going to be a fool, or is he going to be wise? Is he going to be... So basically, they start designing the otherwise simple energy that has no definition, and it's decreed upon him what kind of person it's going to be. The only thing they don't decide is the morality of a person. The morality of a person has to decide on his own. Everything else is predetermined. The sages say, "Tipazu, this drop with mateheyolel, what's going to be on it? Chacham will be wise." But this whole design that's taking place, and this is through the myriads and myriads of contractions. Why does this happen? How does the design take effect? Because the lights and the energy of Chachma that are still very simple. The light of Chachma is still very close to the original Or Ein Sof. What has happened to it is nislabesh, it became enclosed, begavon, in colors, vikeli, and vessels. Colors and vessels. The color is every other color than white. What's the color of the pure, simple light? White. Maybe that's the reason why the seminal drop is also white. Because it's the supernal, it's the essence. It's not yet decided and defined this and that. The light, that is when it is simple. And this is the idea of white clothing. And therefore, the Indian Avel, we find regarding a law. I learned this law in Rambam this week. This past week, we learned the laws of a mourner. So the laws are that a mourner has to have certain laws of which they have to display that they're mourning. And one of the things are for a person that's in mourning of a loss of a close relative. So it says that now let a wear clothing that have been ironed clothing. Very crisp and clean ironed clothing, pressed clothing they can't wear. But it is explained immediately that that's only if it's linen clothing. White linen clothing. Then you can't wear pressed, ironed. But all other clothing, you can take a fresh suit that you sent to the cleaners that was pressed, you can wear it. But if it's white, you can't. You have to wear during the 7 days of mourning. Why? Why only white? Because by white, the pressing, which is part of the procedure of bringing out its color, you put out. Other things, there's already other things mixed. It's not that. I guess the main power of ironing and pressing is in a white linen. And that's why only over there where the pressing and the ironing is the most effective to create a very enhanced garment. So you should tone it down and not wear it in that enhanced state. But the fact that it doesn't apply to other clothing because it's not the same chashivas, it's not the same quality. So now in Siv Beis, I'm not going to learn too far. I just want to learn just the beginning. So now in Perek Beis, he says, so why does it have a connection to the Kohen Gadol on Yom Kippur? Why is it? Understand that the Yom Kippur, Daika, Dafka on Yom Kippur, Yom HaSlicha, which the main idea of Yom Kippur is it's a day of atonement. What does this have to do with atonement? Yesh lahagdim, we're first going to preface in Yadua something that is known. Shayadei kiyam atayro mitzvahs, mamshichem oirois pnimiyim v'oirois makifim. Through the performance of mitzvahs, draw down all the divine energies into this world. And the divine energies come on two levels: indwelling lights and encompassing lights. Internalizable lights and encompassing lights that are higher than us. Primarily through Torah study, we internalize godly light, and through mitzvahs, we draw down lights that are higher than us, encompassing lights. And he explains why. Because the Torah, Torah comes from the origins of the Torah is from God's mind, from Chachma, from wisdom. Wisdom is, as we discussed earlier, the beginning of where lights go into vessels. Since the Torah comes from wisdom, so the Torah draws down the eternal light. Misharsha, and even higher than Chachma, and even goes higher than Chachma. Mimoyach Stma de Erech Anpin, from the concealed level of Moach, of the level called Erech Anpin, which is the level of Keter. That's the root, the very beginning of a light that's going into a vessel. Like if you look at Eitz Chaim from the Arizal over there, he explains that the concealed moach of Keter, which is much higher than Chachma, but still that's the origins of Chachma as it is in Keser. Usoid or pnimi. This is the secret of all internalized lights. V'hamitzvahs. But the commandments, the commandments are taken from the skull of the Erech Anpin, not from the moyach, not from the brain of the Erech Anpin, which means it's more of an encompassing energy. It's an encompassing light, just like the skull encompasses the brain. And now he's going to ask, therefore, that's Torah mitzvahs. And he's going to go and he's going to ask a question, challenge this idea, which I didn't want to do today, simply because I didn't get a chance to really study it and understand it. He's going to challenge it. But the bottom line is going to be that through Torah and mitzvahs, we bring down all the variations of the divine. And when we, God forbid, misobserve, or when we violate or something like that, we mess up these lights and these energies. And Yom Kippur is a day that we fix it all. How do we fix it? We have to go to a place that's beyond all these contaminations and mixtures. It's almost like when you're taking the lights are flowing through the containers, and here you mix different mixtures and you cause toxic accidents, toxic spills, and all kinds of stuff. But that's once the lights are already in vessels. That's where Torah and mitzvahs work. Even mitzvahs, which are encompassing lights, they're also lights that have a relationship to the vessels. When you have to clean it all up, you have to get to the simple white light. So Yom Kippur is the day that we go to that, when we have access on that level. And the peak of it is when the high priest goes into the Holy of Holies. The reason he has to wear the white clothing, linen clothing. That's kind of where this is all going. Stay tuned for next week. As a Hashem, we'll see already the high priest in the temple. We learned in the Sikha, the Rebbe says, we just learned this right before an hour, when I gave the last class, right, the last words. The Rebbe says that when Mashiach comes, every Jew will be the high priest, and we'll be able to go in the Holy of Holies, not only on Yom Kippur. Pretty strong. Okay. Be well, everyone. Thank you for joining.